It's possibly the biggest fraud in Jamaica's financial history. Billions of dollars being swindled from investor accounts at Stocks and Securities Limited, SSL, over more than a decade. The irregularities at the entity came to light in early January, but since then, it has taken several twists and turns, growing greater at times, literally by the hour. In fact, we recorded this episode several times, but had to scrap those because the story took a new turn before we could upload it. Well, this is PTN Plus, and we're trying to make sense of it all. Now, this is what we know so far. About January 12, 2023, the public was made aware of a former manager at SSL, Jean Panton, who had been taking monies from clients' accounts. Now, this is millions of dollars dating back to 2010. The news then got global as we got the bombshell information that Jamaican sprint legend Usain Bolt, who has an account with the entity, was missing $12 million. A signed statement from Jean Panton detailed some 40 SSL clients whose monies she said she borrowed to finance personal and family expenses. She explained a grand scheme of forging signatures and emails to sell client securities and pocket the cash. Now, that's when things started to get complicated. Based on her written confession, that's to SSL, Usain Bolt's account was not listed among those swindled by Miss Panton. That raised more questions. If Panton did not take Bolt's money, then who did? And what other irregularities have been happening at SSL? As I said before, this case seems to change every couple of days, with questions coming fast and furious. Firstly, how did this and other irregularities go unnoticed for over a decade? Also, were the sector regulators not in touch with what is happening in the sector? The Financial Services Commission, FSC, was responsible for overseeing investment entities, including SSL. That's why 1 week later, on January 18, they came under fire at a press conference. Most people said the press conference had no clarification anyway. Now, based on a report in 2017, SSL was classified as a problem institution by the FSC. That's from a report going back as far back as 2011. According to the FSC, SSL was operating with a culture of non-compliance and mismanagement of clients' funds. At that time, SSL was trying to avert a suspension of its license. At the press conference, the then executive director, Everton McFarlane, he did not provide much detail. He listed factors such as the ongoing fraud investigation and confidentiality obligations as roadblocks to giving details of what had really happened. Everton McFarlane was asked to resign by Finance Minister Dr. Nigel Clark the following day. Now, we'll get back to Everton McFarlane in a minute. At the Finance Minister's press conference on Thursday, January 19, emphasis was placed on restoring confidence in the financial sector. Of course, in the grand scheme of the Jamaican economy, this fraud is small. But with world-renowned Usain Bolt being affected, this was being reported by every news outlet, sports channels, tabloids, everyone across the world, and also by hundreds of social media influencers. Everybody had the story. Now, Dr. Clark revealed that contact was made with the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigations, FBI, and other international partners to assist in the investigation. This is what he described himself as the largest securities fraud by a dealer since the inception of the Financial Services Commission, and that was 22 years ago. Now, on January 20, the police, including the Financial Investigations Division, that's the FID, they raided the upscale apartment of the only suspect in the case, Jean Panton, that is located in Millsboro in Upper St. Andrew. For the first time, we got a glimpse into the life of Miss Panton. Very nice neighborhood, expensive apartment complex, expensive vehicles. All this on the heels of what she had written, her written explanation for taking the money, or rather for borrowing millions of dollars from persons who trusted SSL with their cash investments. Now, the only face in the general public of the victims of the fraud has been Usain Bolt. His lawyers wrote to the company demanding the return of the missing funds in 10 days or face a lawsuit. The 10 days expired, and Bolt says he expects action. We're waiting to see that. Now, in addition to that, there have been questions about Bolt's account. Nothing untoward, but questions nonetheless. Firstly, successive CEOs of SSL stated that they were not aware that he had an account with the company. No, that's mind-boggling, since Bolt says he had $12 million with the entity. That's up to 3 months before the fraud was exposed. After the probing, it was revealed that the account was in the name of a company called Wellgen LLC, which is also registered in St. Lucia. Now, as we said, there is nothing illegal about this. St. Lucia is considered a tax haven, and so many Jamaican companies have set up subsidiaries there to take advantage of the 1% income tax rate. These companies are governed by the country's St. Lucia's International Business Companies Act 1999, maintaining absolute confidentiality and security of its clients' details. It's considered smart to invest or to put your money where the money is taxed the least. So nothing untoward about that. But back to the financial probe by the Jamaican government on the sector. Now, one of the greatest concerns has been how this fraud could have gone undetected for more than 10 years. Why wasn't it identified by internal auditors at the entity? Why was the entity allowed to continue operating despite the concerns raised by the FSC? And what of the concerns of the FSC, what the concerns the FSC had raised in their reports? In fact, that is where it all started getting more complicated. Under the FSC's Act, the FSC is required to examine the affairs of entities that it regulates at least once a year, and based on that examination, submit a report to the minister within 90 days. Well, the finance minister revealed that on Thursday, January 24, he was made aware of a report from the FSC on SSL. That report was dated June 25, 2019, following an on-site visit of SSL in June 2019. Now, the minister said it was found during a search of his office. That report was sent by the FSC to the Ministry of Finance on April 13, 2020, and stamped received by the minister's office on April 15, 2020. That's more than 2.5 years before the minister says he was made aware of it. Now, Dr. Clark stated that the FSC board implemented directives that were more extensive than those recommended in the report, and says the FSC status update confirmed that SSL was compliant or largely compliant with 5 of the 6 FSC board mandated directives by April 25, 2020. But all this is still way before he was aware of that the report was done or sent to him. But in light of all of this now, all of this is now unfolding. All this is troubling. The fact that the minister was unaware of the concerns for 2 years because he did not know of the report does not instill trust in the oversight procedures. Which brings us back to the sacked FSC Executive Director Everton McFarlane. Now, if the FSC did its checks and submitted the report, was it at fault? Well, despite doing what it's mandated to do, the report that is, there are still questions about its status update, which suggested that all was now well at the company, and the company was largely compliant. But the saga got even deeper. We're moving on to January 25. Even as swindled investors, along with everybody else who had heard about the fraud, we're all wondering, will persons like Usain Bolt get their monies back? The finance minister announced that the government sought and obtained an injunction from the Supreme Court blocking a move by SSL towards winding up the entity. This, of course, surprised everybody. In the midst of the turmoil this fraud had caused in the sector, the audacity of SSL to even think of such a move. For those of you who are not au fait with the term, winding up refers to the effort to end the operations or declare bankruptcy. This basically includes like liquidation of corporate assets and settling paperwork to allow the business to shut down, to close. In SSL's case, this move would end the possibility of any of these swindled investors getting back their monies. But before we could even get around to praising that move by the government stopped get an injunction to stop winding it up. Before we could get around to praising them, an explosive 7-page statement from SSL, the first since the controversy began. They said that it made no such move to wind up the company. The SSL statement says on January 12, it told the FSC about the appointment of a trustee, and his name is Cadian Campbell, and he's of Phoenix Restructuring Advisory and Insolvency Services Enterprise. Now, it said Mr. Campbell's appointment took effect on January 16, and that gave him power and authority regarding the affairs of the company, gave that to the trustee. SSL insists the purpose of the appointment was not to wind up the company. The finance minister has, however, insisted that the government has information which confirms that Stocks and Securities Limited did in fact attempt to wind up the company. For now, it's somewhat of a he says, she says on this aspect of the widening controversy. In the meantime, there are still questions abound about widening fraud scheme. It's now the beginning of February, and charges still have not been laid against Jean and Panton for the clients she admitted to defrauding. No one else has been identified, not even as a person of interest as yet, in the largest fraud in Jamaica's securities sector in almost 20 years. At this rate, it seems like a long way before investors can even start thinking about getting back their monies. And despite the new oversight measures announced by the Finance Ministry, we still don't know how this could have happened, let alone how definitively to prevent it from happening again. Well, this story changes almost daily, but PTN Plus will continue to track and update you as it unfolds. Like, subscribe, and follow, and continue to watch this space.